At first light, the map looks simple: water and sand, mountains and ports, lines drawn with a ruler. But maps are only the skin of a story. Beneath them run pipelines of memory and power, loyalties forged by years of quiet cooperation and loud necessity. Today, those currents surface in a pact between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. A promise written down after decades of practice, turning habit into doctrine and friendship into an obligation to act. It is a treaty born of storms, regional rivalries, shifting guarantees, and the knowledge that in a dangerous neighborhood, hesitation can be louder than words. For years, the partnership lived in uniforms and airfields, in training ranges drawn on desert horizons. Pakistani officers and specialists have long worked in the kingdom, advising, training, planning, less as visitors than as a familiar presence that arrived with the 1970s and never truly left. The new document does not summon a relationship from thin air. It gives a structure to what already exists, codifying mutual assistance, shared planning, and the expectation that when one nation's stability is threatened, from outside or within, the other will not merely sympathize, but support. This is how states speak when they worry the weather may turn. Saudi Arabia reads the region through the lens of proximity. The menace of extremist organizations, the push and pull of rival powers, the choke points of trade and faith and oil. Pakistan reads it through the experience of warfighting, of counterinsurgency learned not in lectures, but in the hard arithmetic of casualties and compromise. Each brings an answer the other cannot manufacture alone. Saudi resources and reach, Pakistani expertise under fire. Together, the promise is deterrence with a human voice, capability buttressed by credibility. But promises are also signals. They ripple. Neighbors hear them. Adversaries interpret them. Partners test them. The pact says, we are not isolated pieces on separate boards. We are connected, and we will be read as connected. That reading can steady the ground, dissuading opportunists who gamble on disunity, or it can sharpen the calculus of response, tempting a test of strength to map the pact's edges. Strategy here is not only what is written, it is what is inferred. If the present is a contract, the past is its preamble. In Pakistan, history still speaks in place names. Once there was Lialpur. Then, in the 1970s, in a gesture that was both gratitude and alignment, Lialpur became Faisalabad, honoring the Saudi monarch whose memory still figures in the city's story. To rename is to declare, we remember the help, we intend the friendship to endure. The word has outlived the politics of its day, becoming woven into trade routes and textile mills, a daily reminder that symbolism and strategy rarely travel far apart. So what does this new chapter claim? Not an empire, not a crusade. Its authors frame it as protective rather than predatory, defensive in nature, an architecture for collaboration among states that insist on international law, peaceful coexistence, and the right to stand up when threatened. It is written with a particular audience in mind, the wider Muslim world, where unity is often invoked like an anthem and practiced like a negotiation. The pact's message is plain. Safeguarding the community requires structure, not sentiment. Solidarity is a system, not a slogan. From such beginnings, some imagine something larger, a scaffold for a broader security network among Muslim-majority states. They picture coordination that outlives any single crisis, intelligence shared before attacks, exercises planned before emergencies, a doctrine strong enough to outlast personalities. It is an old idea in new clothes. A NATO for Muslims, tailored to the geography and grievances of a region that has endured more than its share of proxy fires. Ambition sketches the outline, reality edits the draft. Different governments, competing interests and long memories resist easy consolidation. A block must be welded, not wished. Where might the metal bend? At the limits of help. Money can move quickly, aircraft cannot be everywhere at once. Logistics can be planned, escalation cannot be perfectly contained. In a region where nuclear thresholds are visible on clear days and misread signals travel faster than apologies, even friends must mind the ladder they are climbing. Deterrence is useful precisely because it is believable. It is dangerous because it can be misunderstood. There is also the shadow of example, the unmatched military sophistication of Israel and the depth of its partnership with the United States. That combination weighs on every calculation. For some, a strengthened axis between Islamabad and Riyadh merely restores balance. For others, it threatens to provoke an arms race of attention and anxiety. Power seeks counterpower. It is an old law of the system. Stability, if it arrives, is negotiated, not declared. Inside Pakistan, the calculus of strength includes something brutally practical: electricity. A nation's ability to deter is tied to its ability to function. Blackouts do not respect doctrine. Aging infrastructure, volatile fuel markets, and imported oil create a vulnerability that no speech can close. Cooperation with Saudi Arabia can ease the shortages that drain growth and readiness. Yet every lifeline can become a leash if it is not balanced with reform and diversification. Dependency solves tonight's outage and complicates tomorrow's decision. Strategy must count both. So the pact is not merely about war. It is about the mundane heroics of capacity, fuel moved on time, a radar that does not blink, a factory that does not pause. When treaties promise security, this is what the promise means in the lives of citizens. Not abstraction, but continuity, the ability to plan, to work, to sleep through the night without a siren or a sudden darkness. Skeptics will say every alliance narrows your options. Support offered may be support owed. Alignment is never free. They are not wrong. Foreign policy is a ledger of choices, not a mural of ideals. Pakistan will have to balance Gulf ties with its neighborhood and great power relationships, keeping enough slack in the rope to step sideways when needed. Saudi Arabia will have to weigh every commitment against the geometry of its own partnerships. That is the price of being visible and necessary at once. Yet when the furnaces of the world run hotter, caution alone does not keep you safe. Coordination does. Doctrine does. The will to communicate clearly under pressure does. This is where the pact earns its relevance, as a standing plan for moments when the margin of error shrinks and the only substitute for preparation is regret. And because messages never stop at their target, the pact casts a longer moral line. The lesson offered is less reprimand than invitation. Choose cooperation over sabotage. Deny your soil to violence that bleeds neighbors. Trade the charisma of defiance for the quieter courage of alignment. Strength, the pact insists, is not a matter of isolation. It is the ability to stand with others without losing yourself. That is a form of dignity too often left out of the slogans. What remains is to imagine tomorrow honestly. Two futures present themselves. In the first, signals are sent and received with care. Exercises are routine. Crises are managed without ceremony, and the region learns slowly to treat security as a shared craft. In the second, commitments crowd decision-making. A peripheral incident tests the pact's contours. A misstep requires an apology at speed. The difference among these futures lies not in rhetoric, but in the discipline to make restraint audible. When we speak of defense, we are really speaking of people. Not just soldiers on a range, but parents counting bills by lantern light, merchants whose shipments depend on predictable tides, pilgrims whose journeys require both faith and logistics. Alliances justify themselves here or not at all. If the promise of the Pakistan-Saudi Pact is to be anything more than an emblem on parchment, it will be measured in these quiet ledgers of daily life. Still, no treaty is a spell. It cannot cleanse the region of rival agendas or cure the mistrust written into its borders. Nor should it. The goal is humbler and harder, to give responsible states a way to act together without amplifying harm, to prove that deterrence can coexist with restraint, to show that Muslim solidarity is something more than the chorus of a speech. This is the maturity the pact tries to embody, unity that is engineered rather than imagined. Look again at the map. The lines are still there, water and sand, mountains and ports. But the eye lingers differently now, on a city renamed in gratitude and strategy, on airfields where old habits have found new signatures, on sea lanes that know the price of turbulence, on power grids that flicker less when partners plan well. The future will not stand still for anyone. It must be courted with realism and care. That is what this pact attempts, to bring order to a trust already earned in practice and to ask the region to read that order as an invitation to stability rather than an omen of confrontation. In the end, promises between states are humble things, paper and ink, a seal pressed flat. They take on meaning the moment they're tested. The Pakistan-Saudi Defense Pact will face such moments. Some will arrive as headlines. Others will come as choices nobody else will see. In each, the question will be the same. Can two nations translate brotherhood into policy, deterrence into discipline, solidarity into safety? If the answer is yes, often enough, the credits will roll not with triumph, but with something steadier. The sense that in a loud, uncertain era, two actors chose to be reliable and to make reliability contagious. That, in this corner of the world, would be no small peace.